All right, hello everybody. We are back with a little short video. Um, I just want to talk about the upcoming play-in game between the Timberwolves and the Clippers. You know what I'm saying? Just talk about some things that we need to watch for in this matchup coming up. Of course, I'm gonna have a little more insight on the Timberwolves because I watched them way more than I watched the Clippers this year. But just want to talk about some things that could potentially develop during the course of the game and stuff like that. The first thing that we need to say out the gate is just like if you're trying to watch any of the previous games to like get any idea of what's going to happen in this game, you might as well just not even do that. Like, I don't think there's anything of substance that can really be gleaned from the first what are three, four matchups they played. I think they played four times. See, I don't even know how many times they played because every time they played, something was going on that gave somebody a disadvantage, something like that. D'Angelo Russell, I don't think played in three of the games, and Paul George was there for the first two or the first three. He was there for the first three, and then he wasn't there for one of them, and he hadn't been there for a long time. So the team is operating differently as far as the Clippers are concerned. The Wolves back then, they hadn't really figured out their offense in the first three games where they were getting absolutely killed by them boys. Well, they hung in those first couple games, but like you know, they were still trying to like post cat to the detriment of the offense, and just they hadn't really figured out their way yet. And the one game where they kind of were starting to figure it out, like the third game they played, the only one that Russell played in, they were on the second game of a back to back after a big win over the Lakers, like for a young team that was in LA overnight. Like you don't know what could have really, was it back to back? It was either back to back or they had a day off. I can't remember which. I think it was a back to back. But just a lot of confounding factors that just don't tell you too much of anything about like what this game is going to be tomorrow. But some things that we can kind of glean from the course of like the Timberwolves season and things that they got to kind of worry about tomorrow. The number one thing that they have to worry about, the number one thing above all else, and it's like this almost transcends basketball. They have to make sure that Cat doesn't lose his mind in the first quarter. Like they have to. I don't know what happened. Like the basketball guys are funny, man. Like they gave him this generational talent of just like being able to shoot the bejeebus out the ball, having agility even though his feet are super big, just like being one of the most skilled big men we've ever seen, right? Then on the other hand, he just cannot commit to memory the fact that he shouldn't make the fouls that he makes, the touch fouls that he makes every game nearly at this rate. So the first thing that the Wolves have to worry about is the trustworthiness of the availability of Karl-Anthony Towns. If he's gonna, I'm not so worried about like offensive fouls and stuff. Like in the beginning of the season, he doesn't seem to take matchups personally like that anymore. He hasn't really been gotten out of his game in a long time in that respect. But still, he's still prone to putting his hands on people and pushing people and stuff like that. Not necessarily out of aggression, but just like having his hands in places where they don't need to be. And if you get the wrong refereeing crew, he can have two fouls in the first 2 minutes, and then it's up to Finch to decide whether or not to leave him in, because he did that from time to time, and Carl has not rewarded him by not picking up that third foul in the first quarter, especially like over the past 2 months. So before any schematic things are really talked about, the first thing that they have to worry about is Karl-Anthony Towns staying on the floor, because the Clippers have a lot of size on the front end. I won't say a lot, but they have enough size to bother the Wolves, particularly if Naz Reid is going to play significant minutes, because Naz Reid, love the guy, highly skilled, for his position and things like that. But at the prospect of like opposing forces and like having to play physical and stuff, he just does not show up enough to be relied on in a game like this. If it gets any type of physical, his hands get a little fumbly, like on rebounds and things like that, and he kind of just, he can kind of disappear, especially if his shot is not on. So, number one, Karl-Anthony Towns has to be available on the court. Number two, it all depends. Their success in this game is going to depend on what kind of defense they play. More than anything, their offense, I'm not really too concerned about it, but their defense, it could go either way because they've been kind of playing a hybrid of styles over like the past 2 months as opposed to like the exclusive like what they call high wall concept that they had been doing pretty much the entire season, which relied on a lot of like, of course, shot variance and things like that, but also just speed of recovery and rotations and things like that that they had to tune into and stuff like that. But over the course of the last 2 months, they've been kind of mixing in some drop and, you know what I'm saying, doing a lot of hybrid kind of zone things that they've been doing to like mixed success. The one thing that I'm relatively confident that they should be able to do is, even though they have nights where they kind of give up a lot to other teams in terms of scoring, they've generally been good at like game planning individual players. So like the prospect of a Paul George like going for like 40 and kind of killing them is like less worrisome to me than it would be like otherwise. Like we've had like a guy like Trae Young go off on them in spurts and things like that, but like for the most part, if there's a singular force on a team that they need to stop or need to slow down to a significant like degree, they've been able to do that as far as like scoring is concerned. Now, the thing that gives them problem across like all like types of defenses, all kind of coverages that they play, is that they have a hard time containing how do I put this? They have a hard time containing quick decision makers like on the periphery of a team. So if you have a team that's constructed of at least one good drive and kick guy, and then they have a couple second like tertiary guys that can catch and make a pass or like drive and kick off of a drive and kick, then the Wolves are in trouble like in those respects. And so what we're going to have to see is whether or not the Clippers role players are going to be able to punish the Wolves for like, for lack of a better term, leaving them open, because they just live with the percentages on those kind of situations. So they'll allow some penetration due to like the high wall concept. They'll allow a ball to get into a spot, and then they'll, you know, it opens them up for corner threes and things like that. And, you know, generally you just play the math in that situation. And they've had relative success like at home and like kind of just relying on those guys to like miss. Of course, they're closing out and things like that, but they're kind of just playing the math at that point. The one thing that gives them problem, particularly in the high wall concept type of defense that they play, is like bigs who are able to make decisions off the short roll and things like that, like, or just generally finish when they catch the ball in the middle of the paint. Like Dwight Powell's been killing them all year. We saw DeAndre Ayton just giving them the absolute blues, and he was missing he was missing bunnies. He was still killing them. Like, so there are several things, like several holes in their defense that are kind of there by design, and they kind of sacrifice things to like stop a guy and just hope that the other guys don't have a good night. So, you know, this could be a game where Luke Kennard just give them 35. Like, it could happen. Like, of course, on the other end, we have Ty Lue, who is just a great schemer of the shooty hoops and is great at making adjustments and things like that. So I'm sure he's pouring over that film right now and trying to figure out ways to, like, you know what I'm saying, break down his defense and things like that and get open looks for his team. And if they are able to convert, you know, it might be a long night for the Wolves. But I think that the Wolves, I think they're gonna be ready. They haven't really shown up when it was time to like prepare and win a game or like just to lock in. They haven't had many instances in which they weren't able to do that to some degree. The question for them in this playing game is whether or not they have the experience, like, to, you know what I'm saying. I don't want to say they're going to be scared necessarily, but to like follow the game plan and kind of lock into the execution in a high leverage moment like this. Like, of course, we know about Patrick Beverly. He's been there before. Torian Prince has some experience. I can't remember if he's been to. I believe he has, but I'm not. Was he? I don't know if he got hurt. But anyway, so Patrick Beverly's been there before. Cat has been in a game like this versus the Nuggets a few years ago, but he doesn't have that much playoff experience. D'Angelo Russell has some experience in the playoffs as well, and like trying to close out seeds and stuff like that. So they've been in games like this before. And if Cat can stay on the floor, I don't see him like having problems like scoring or anything like that, because I don't think the Hartensteins and the Zubats can really keep up with him on the perimeter if that's how they decide to play him. And I think that's the matchup that the Wolves have to exploit. And they do a bad job at it. Well, not a bad job. Like D'Angelo Russell doesn't do a bad job at it, but they kind of get away from it after the first quarter, and that's kind of when those 2 minutes, those two, as in D'Angelo Russell and Karl-Anthony Towns, their minutes kind of separate, and it often becomes a thing where it's kind of harder to get Cat the ball, generally because people just can't draw the kind of attention that D'Angelo Russell does, and they don't make the decision that he does with the speed that he does. So, and is going to be very important, and he's going to be important in the sense of, even if he's not like hitting shots or anything like that, if he's just hijacking the offense and stuff like that, it might be a long night. But if he's confidently making decisions within the system and within the offense, and just, attacking like he should, I think the Wolves have more than a good enough chance to win this game. The X factor in this game, I know I mentioned Cat and fouls and stuff like that, but the X factor, as it always is for the Clippers specifically, is whether or not Reggie Jackson is just going to cook or not. Because Reggie Jackson is a good player, like as an NBA like prototype player. Like he's a kind of a player that can give the Wolves fits, because he can do things in the pick and roll, and he can pull up and shoot and things like that. He can just, what I'm saying, he can get his if he needs to get his. The question with him always is how much of his is he going to get, because he's kind of a feast or famine guy sometimes. But when that boy feasting, he is feasting, and like if he just shows up to the arena and he's in one of those modes, like it might be a long night for the Wolves. Also with Paul George flanked on the other side of him. I think the Wolves have a chance to kind of like exploit the lack of cohesion that the Clippers have, because although the Wolves have kind of been in flux for like the past 2 weeks, people have been in and out of the lineup. Jaden hadn't really played in a while, so they haven't really had their full complement of guys in a singular game in a while. Besides like the game they lost against the Wizards, I believe, but that was just like they weren't really doing what they were supposed to in that game, which could be kind of a harbinger of what could give them problems in this game. Because although they do have problems with size and like guys finishing around them on offense, I don't think the Clippers have the kind of bigs that will give them a problem from scoring and rebounding aspect, as far as exploiting the gaps in their defense and like when they kind of lose focus on coverage and things like that. Of course, Zubac is a good player. My guy Zubats, former Laker extraordinaire. Should have kept him. Magic, what was you doing? Anyway, but they are more of a, secure the possession and make sure everything is running, instead of a kill you with, giving you a nice 20 and 10 or anything like that if you kind of leave them to their own devices. So it's not really too much for me in terms of a prediction. I do think the Wolves are going to win. I think that the home court advantage is going to be significant for the first time in since 2017, 2018, whatever year they made the playoffs. That was the last time that arena had any type of significant noise in it. I know people have been giving the fans a lot of props and things like that, but you can still hear that it's not quite like, it ain't rocking up in there. And teams generally have had a bad time in Target Center like all season. Of course, the Clippers didn't when they played, but again, like I said, that was a wholly different Timberwolves team. D'Angelo Russell didn't play in those games, and he was kind of like the focal point of their defense at that point and offense. So the Wolves are a better team now. The Clippers, of course, they got Paul George back and things like that, but of course there's still some things that you got to iron out when you get somebody like that back. And you have good games, bad games. They've had the best offense in the NBA, I think I saw, since Paul George's return. But even still, like there could be a game where they just don't communicate well, or the rust is still there in some respects. So the Clippers have a lot of wing talent, but the Wolves aren't really a individual like team in that way. They have a system that they run that they can get things out. And the only person that can kind of fall into the trap that might be swamped by the wings and like kind of the overwhelming amount of people they have on the perimeter is Ant. So if they play within the system, I think there's going to be a lot of mid-range opportunities for D'Angelo Russell and Anthony Edwards, who has started shooting that shot more, which is, I think, a great sign for his development, because you just can't just keep ramming into the paint like that. So he's been getting off the ball early. He's been shooting mid-range shots, and you can see he's playing a little bit better. He didn't play particularly well the last game, but that wasn't really a game that anybody should be concerned about. But too long, didn't watch, because people famously fast forward to the end to get to the point. Wolves have to be concerned with Cat's fouling troubles. The defense that they play is going to be highly dependent on whether or not they win or lose. If they play drop coverage, they might get cooked, because Cat is just isn't good in it. Like, we've got years and years of evidence at this point that he's just not a guy who can contain like that. But if they play the high wall, they have to make sure that they are present on the short roll passes, and like just making sure that they can hedge and recover to corner shooters and things like that, because those shots are going to be open, and they got to just hope the various guys are with them in that respect. Offensively, I think they need to lean on D'Angelo Russell and Karl-Anthony Towns a little bit more. Chris Finch, he trusts his bench a whole lot, like a whole lot. And I'm interested to see whether or not he leans on them for significant stretches, or whether or not he plays all of his starters 38, 40 minutes a game. 38, 40 minutes in this particular game. Because like I said, I don't know if you want a lot of Naz Reid out there. Jordan McLaughlin, he's a great energy guy, but sometimes he's just too small out there. And if this is one of the times where he's too small out there, you just can't have him out there, because, he's going to give it all he has, but sometimes, it's just not enough. So we have to look out for that. I think Taurean Prince is going to play a major role in this game as well. He wasn't really good when they played. Like, he was struggling back then. And so he's another just factor that the Wolves hadn't had back then that they have now at their disposal. Jaden has gotten better. So there are many avenues for them to actually win this game. And I think they will win this game. Vegas appears to think they're going to win this game too, which I did not expect at all. But I think the Wolves are going to win this game. I think it's going to be a close game. And hopefully we'll see some playoff basketball, at least 4 more games. If they play the Grizzlies, we could talk about the Grizzlies series. I got some thoughts about that series, because I don't know if the Grizzlies really want to play them. They might want to, but I don't know if they actually want to. You know what I mean? So I'm going to get off this camera. I said a lot of nothing, but a lot of something as well. You know what I mean? But I keep promising the Garland video. I had to get this microphone fixed. Well, not fixed. Something was wrong with it. So I still haven't recorded the audio. I have all the clips, and once I record the audio, everything else is going to be smooth sailing from there. So be on the lookout for that, hopefully before the first playoff game, because I got some other things I got to do. But other than that, I'll see y'all soon.